5 years ago, the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, and for many people, the images from Kabul became a symbol of a country once again losing control of its own future. Families crowded around the airport, desperate to leave. Parents feared what the return of the Taliban would mean for their children. Women who had built careers, gone to university, and worked in public life suddenly faced a future in which many of those freedoms would disappear. 5 years on, the war may be largely over, but for millions of Afghans, the struggle to survive, to work, to learn, and to simply live with dignity continues. And behind the statistics are families trying to hold their lives together. A mother wondering how she will feed her children. A father unable to find enough work to pay for that food. A family returning from Pakistan or Iran with nowhere to live and no reliable income. Afghanistan is facing a deepening humanitarian crisis while international aid has fallen and millions of people have been forced to rely on assistance simply to get through another day. But perhaps the most painful story is being written in Afghanistan's classrooms, or rather in the classrooms that are now empty. A girl who was in 6th grade when the Taliban imposed restrictions on secondary education has now reached adulthood without returning to school. Imagine being 12 years old and being told that the future you had imagined for yourself has simply been taken away. You may have dreamed of becoming a doctor, a teacher, a journalist, or an engineer. Instead, your world becomes smaller. Your education stops. Your ability to work is restricted. Your freedom to move is curtailed. And the choices that previous generations of Afghan women fought to gain are steadily disappearing. The consequences extend far beyond those girls themselves. When women cannot work, families lose income. When women cannot train as doctors, teachers, and health workers, the entire country loses skill it desperately needs. This is not simply a question of employment. It is about whether half of the country's population is allowed to contribute to its future. And alongside hunger and exclusion becomes repression. Journalists, activists, human rights defenders, and critics face intimidation and detention. Public punishments continue. The restrictions on women and girls have become deeply embedded in everyday life, while the international community continues to debate how to deal with a government that controls the country but refuses to respect fundamental human rights. That creates a painful dilemma for those outside in the wider world. Afghanistan still needs humanitarian assistance. People cannot simply be abandoned because of a government that controls their country. But every diplomatic handshake, every invitation to a foreign capital, every step forward towards normalization risks sending another message that the world is prepared to accept what has happened to Afghan women and girls as the price of dealing with the Taliban. For ordinary Afghans, however, this is not really about diplomacy. It is about a mother trying to feed her children. It is about a father trying to find work. It is about a girl sitting at home when she should be sitting in a classroom. It is about young people growing up in a country where their dreams are being narrowed before they've even had a chance to discover what they might become. 5 years is a political milestone for governments and diplomats, but for an Afghan child, 5 years is almost an entire childhood. And that may be the greatest tragedy of all. An entire generation is growing up not asking what they will become, but learning simply how to survive.
There is another consequence that is harder to measure. What happens to hope when children grow up believing that certain futures are simply not available to them? For millions of Afghan girls, the message has been brutally clear. Education beyond the 6th grade is closed to them. University is closed. Many jobs are closed. Their movement and participation in public life are heavily restricted. Yet Afghan women have not simply disappeared. Some continue to teach in secret, others work from home, support their families, or find ways to provide healthcare and education despite the restrictions. They are fighting to preserve something that is perhaps even more important than a job or a classroom. The belief that their lives belong to them, but they are doing so while the humanitarian situation becomes increasingly desperate. Millions of Afghans have returned from neighbouring countries, many arriving with little money, no home, and no reliable source of income. Aid agencies are struggling to meet the scale of the need. And as hunger deepens, women and children often pay the highest price. So the question is not simply what Afghanistan has lost during 5 years of Taliban rule. It is what the country could lose if this continues. Doctors who never qualify, teachers who never enter a classroom, entrepreneurs who never start businesses, girls who never discover what they are capable of. And that is how a humanitarian crisis becomes something much larger, the loss of a generation's potential.
Since the Taliban returned to power, Afghanistan is facing a crisis that cannot be measured only in numbers. It is measured in empty classrooms, hungry children, unemployed parents, and women who have been pushed out of public life they once helped build. But there is still something the Taliban have not managed to take away completely: the determination of ordinary Afghans to build a better life. Mothers continue to fight for their children. Women continue to find ways to work and learn. Young people continue to dream, even when the doors in front of them are closed. The international community now faces a difficult choice: how to engage with those who control Afghanistan without normalising the repression they impose. Because for the people living there, 5 years is not an anniversary to be celebrated.